The sun hung low over the Montana Valley like a dying ember, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Redemption Creek. Sarah Calloway stood at the edge of town with everything she owned loaded onto a borrowed wagon, a widow of 28 with 3 sons and nowhere left to go. She knocked on 7 doors that afternoon. 7 Christian families who sang hymns on Sunday. 7 rejections delivered with tight lips and averted eyes. A woman alone with 3 half-breed boys wasn't respectable. Wasn't safe. Wasn't wanted. The bank had taken her land. The church had offered prayers but no shelter. Now the autumn wind cut through her threadbare shawl as darkness gathered in the pines above town, and her youngest son, 4-year-old Daniel, asked the question that shattered her. "Mama, where do we sleep tonight?" That's when she heard the hoofbeats. A man emerged from the tree line on a massive roan horse, broad-shouldered and silent, with a beard dark as coal and eyes that had seen things civilized folks couldn't imagine. He sat motionless for a long moment, studying her broken wagon, her frightened sons, her desperate face. Then he spoke just 3 words that would change everything. "You're home now." What Sarah didn't know was that this stranger had his own reasons for helping her. Reasons that had nothing to do with mercy, and everything to do with a debt 15 years in the making. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward the rifle propped against the wagon seat. Her 2 older boys, Thomas and Jacob, stepped closer to their mother, their mixed Crow and Irish features tensing with the wariness they'd learned too young. Daniel buried his face in Sarah's skirt. The mountain man didn't move. Didn't smile. Just sat there as the last sunlight caught the knife handle protruding from his boot and the rifle slung across his back. "I'm Caleb Thorne," he said finally, his voice like gravel shifting. "Got a cabin 8 miles north. Room enough. Work enough. Pay enough." He paused, then added, "If you've got the spine for mountain living." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Every warning her mother had ever given her about strange men echoed in her mind. But the temperature was dropping fast, and Daniel was already shivering against her leg. "Why?" she managed. "You don't know us." Caleb's eyes, granite gray in the fading light, shifted to her son's. Something flickered across his weathered face. Memory, maybe? Or pain. "Known plenty of folks," he said. "Most ain't worth the powder to blow them to hell. But I can spot quality when I see it." He nodded toward Thomas, who stood with his shoulders back despite his fear. "Boy's got his mama's courage. That counts for something." Thomas was 12, old enough to feel pride swell in his chest at the words. Jacob, 10, glanced at his older brother, then back at the stranger. Sarah studied Caleb Thorne. His clothes were worn but clean. His horse was well kept. He carried himself with the careful stillness of a man who'd survived when others hadn't. Dangerous, certainly. But there was no whiskey on his breath, no meanness in his eyes. "What kind of work?" she asked. "I trap. Hunt. Sell furs and timber down in Helena come spring. Winter's closing in. I need someone to keep the cabin proper, cooking, mending, teaching the boys to read while I'm in the mountains." He paused. "Your husband was Ben Calloway." "It wasn't a question." Sarah's breath caught. "You knew him?" "Knew of him. Heard he married a Crow woman's daughter. Heard he treated her right and didn't care what the town thought. Heard he died honest, trying to save another man's cattle from a stampede." Caleb's expression remained unreadable. "Heard the town forgot all that the minute he was in the ground." Sarah's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Not in front of this stranger. Not in front of her sons. "A woman alone in a cabin with a single man," she said quietly. "You know what they'd say. They already say worse." Caleb's words were blunt but not cruel. "And I don't give a damn what folks in Redemption Creek think. Never have." He gathered his reins. "It's full dark in an hour. Offer stands until I reach that ridge. After that, I got my own business to tend to." He turned his horse toward the mountain trail. Sarah looked at her sons, Thomas with his father's strong jaw, Jacob with his grandfather's sharp eyes, Daniel with his mother's copper skin and trusting heart. She thought of the 7 doors shut in her face. The banker's cold smile when he'd handed her the foreclosure papers. The preacher's wife who'd called her boys unfortunate, and suggested an orphanage back east might be more appropriate. She thought of her husband Ben, who'd loved her from the first moment he saw her helping her Crow mother sell beadwork at the trading post. Who'd married her despite his family's fury. Who'd built her a home with his own hands and filled it with laughter until a stupid accident took him away forever. Ben would have protected them. But Ben was gone. Now there was only this stranger and the gathering dark. "Mr. Thorne," she called out. He stopped but didn't turn. "We accept your offer," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "But I keep my rifle loaded. And the first time you give me cause to doubt your word, we're gone." "Understood?" Caleb looked back over his shoulder. For the first time, something almost resembling approval crossed his face. "Fair terms," he said. "Now get that wagon moving before the temperature drops another 10 degrees. Mountain doesn't wait for anyone." As they followed Caleb Thorne into the wilderness, Sarah noticed something that made her breath catch. Carved into the stock of his rifle, barely visible in the twilight, were initials. BC. The same initials as her dead husband. She said nothing. But as the wagon creaked up the narrow trail and Redemption Creek disappeared behind them, Sarah Calloway wondered what kind of devil's bargain she'd just made, and whether she'd live long enough to regret it. The journey took 3 hours through increasingly rough terrain. Thomas walked beside the wagon while Jacob kept Daniel warm. Caleb rode ahead in silence, his stillness as thick as the darkness gathering between the pines. When they reached the clearing, Sarah saw the cabin by moonlight, solid timber with a stone chimney, a barn, and a breathtaking valley view. This wasn't some ramshackle shelter. This was a home built by someone who knew what he was doing. "Barn's got fresh straw," Caleb said, dismounting. "Get the boys settled while I make fire." Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. One main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, 2 smaller rooms separated by curtains. Books lined one wall, Shakespeare, Thoreau, a worn Bible. Mountain men didn't usually keep libraries. Caleb worked in silence, building a fire and producing salt pork, beans, and cornbread. The boys devoured everything. "Small room's yours," he told Sarah. "Boys can have the other. I'll sleep in the barn until spring." "The barn? In winter?" "Got a stove. Prefer it." He pulled on his coat. "Don't touch the locked trunk under the window, and don't go into the root cellar without me. Wolves come down after dark. Keep the rifle close." He was gone before she could respond. That night, she lay awake listening to wind in the pines and animals in the darkness. Through the window, lamplight glowed in the barn. Caleb Thorne was still awake too. She thought again of those initials on his rifle. BC morning came with the smell of coffee and bacon. The pattern established itself quickly. Caleb rose before dawn, worked until dark, spoke only when necessary. He showed Thomas how to check trap lines, taught Jacob to identify tracks, let Daniel help stack firewood. But he never smiled. Never relaxed. Never spoke about himself. On the 4th day, Sarah found him behind the barn, staring at something in his hands, a small beaded bracelet, chromade, colors faded with age. He saw her, and tucked it away quickly. "Not your concern. Those initials on your rifle. BC. You said you knew of my husband," I said knew of him. "That's all." His voice went cold. "You've got food, shelter, and safety. Don't go looking for more than that." That night, putting Daniel to bed, she noticed a small wooden box on the high shelf. Inside were carved animals, a bear, an elk, a wolf. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. "Mr. Thorne made these," Thomas said. "He gave them to Daniel. Said every boy needs toys." Sarah held the tiny wolf. This hard, silent man had spent hours carving gifts for her son. The answer came 2 weeks later, when 3 men rode up just after dawn. Sarah was hanging laundry when she heard horses. Her blood went cold. Clayton Mercer, the wealthiest rancher in the territory, whose reputation made decent people cross the street. Caleb emerged from the barn, rifle ready. "Heard you taking in some charity cases, Thorne," Mercer said, his smile sharp. "Didn't believe it. State your business or ride out." Mercer's 2 hired guns spread out. Sarah's hands moved toward the laundry basket where she'd hidden her rifle. "Just being neighborly," Mercer said. "Wanted to warn you about hiring on strangers. Especially breed women with questionable backgrounds." His eyes slid to Sarah with contempt. Thomas and Jacob appeared in the doorway, fists clenched, faces burning. Caleb's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Mercer's horse sidestep. "You've got 3 seconds to apologize to the lady," Mercer laughed. "You threatening me? I know exactly who you are, Clayton. The man who burned out the Johnsons. Who had Tom Birch beaten. Who thinks money makes you untouchable." Caleb took 1 step forward. "I also know you're the man whose son died 15 years ago. And you've spent every day since blaming the wrong people." Mercer's face went white, then purple. "You son of a bitch, the lady's waiting for your apology." The hired guns tensed. Sarah pulled the rifle from the basket. But Thomas was faster. The 12-year-old walked straight toward Mercer's horse, spine straight, voice steady. "My mother's a good woman. Better than you'll ever be. And if you can't see that, you're not just mean, you're stupid." The clearing went silent. Then Caleb Thorne laughed, a rough, rusty sound like machinery that hadn't been used in years. "Boy's got a point. Now you've been insulted by a 12-year-old. Leaving right now seems awful sensible." Mercer yanked his horse around. "This isn't finished, Thorne." They rode out in a cloud of snow and fury. Caleb watched until they disappeared, then looked at Thomas. "Brave. Also damn stupid. Don't do it again." But Sarah saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before: respect. That night, after the boys were asleep, she confronted him. What did he mean about his son? What happened 15 years ago? Caleb stared into the fire for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "His name was Billy Mercer. He was 8 years old. And he died because I wasn't fast enough to save him." The fire crackled as Caleb's words hung in the air. Sarah waited, barely breathing, while snow whispered against the windows. "I wasn't always mountain folk," Caleb said finally. 15 years back, I was deputy in Stillwater, 100 miles south. Young, stupid, thought wearing a badge made me somebody." His jaw tightened. "Thought I could save everyone." He paced to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. Clayton Mercer owned half that town too. His boy Billy was wild, good kid, full of energy. One day, Billy and another boy, Crow kid named James Redfeather, decided to borrow a raft and float down the river. Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. Current caught them. Raft came apart. I was on patrol when I heard the screaming. Caleb's hands clenched. Got to the riverbank and saw both boys in the water. James had grabbed a branch 20 yards downstream. Billy was further out, being swept toward the rapids. "You could only save one," Sarah whispered. "Had maybe 10 seconds to choose. One rope. One chance. I chose James. He was closer, and I thought I'd have time to get Billy after." The silence stretched like a wound. Billy went over the falls. They found his body 3 days later. Caleb turned back, raw grief carved into his face. Clayton buried his only son and swore he'd destroy everyone responsible. He ran James's family out. Got me fired. Spread word I'd chosen to save the Indian boy over his son. But it wasn't about race, wasn't it? I've asked myself that for 15 years. Caleb's laugh was bitter. What I do know is that James Redfeather grew up, married a white woman, and had 3 sons before a cattle stampede killed him 5 months ago. The world tilted. Your husband's crow name was James Redfeather, Sarah said slowly. Before he took the name Ben Calloway. I recognized him in town a few years back. Stayed away, figured I'd brought him enough trouble. Caleb's eyes met hers. Then I heard he died. Heard his widow and boys were being treated like dirt. Heard Clayton Mercer had bought up the bank loan on their property. He took our land deliberately. Because of who Ben was. Mercer's been waiting 15 years for revenge. Your husband was too well-liked to move against directly. But once Ben was gone, you became easy targets. Caleb's voice hardened. I couldn't save Billy Mercer. Couldn't stop what happened to James's family after. But I'll be damned if I let that bastard destroy James's sons too. Everything suddenly made sense. The initials on the rifle, the cabin, the immediate offer of help. Caleb hadn't been performing charity. He'd been paying a debt 15 years in the making. Did Ben know who you were? We talked once. 3 years ago. I apologized. Caleb's voice grew quiet. He said he never blamed me. Said I did what any good man would have done, saved the one I could reach. Said he'd lived a good life despite everything. He looked at her directly. I didn't bring you here expecting gratitude. I brought you because those boys deserve better. Because their father saved my sanity when he told me to stop carrying a dead child's ghost. And because Clayton Mercer doesn't get to win. Not this time. Sarah crossed to where Caleb stood and took his hand. His fingers were calloused, scarred, warm. Thank you, she said. Not just for the shelter. For telling me the truth. Caleb looked at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what human contact felt like. Then, gently, he pulled away. Truth's just the beginning. Mercer won't let this go. He'll come again, and next time it won't be to talk. Then what do? We prepare. We stay smart. And when he makes his move, we make damn sure he regrets it. Over the next 2 weeks, the cabin transformed. Caleb taught Thomas and Jacob to shoot properly. Showed Sarah the cave system behind the property where they could hide. Stocked extra ammunition, reinforced the barn, set up warning bells on the trails. But he also softened. Sarah would catch him smiling when Daniel told stories. Hear him patiently explaining tracking to Jacob. See him teaching Thomas chess in the evenings. The mountain man was becoming family. One night, while Sarah mended shirts, Caleb spoke without looking up. You remind me of her. Woman I almost married. Before Billy Mercer died, before everything went to hell. She was strong like you. He smiled faintly. Left me when the town turned against me. I do blame her, Sarah said firmly. People who only stand by you when it's easy aren't worth having. Caleb looked at her then, really looked, and Sarah felt something shift between them, something warm and terrifying and unexpected. Your husband was a lucky man, Caleb said softly. Yes, he was. But he's gone. And we're still here. The words hung heavy with implication. Before either could speak again, the warning bell jangled violently. Caleb was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Get the boys to the cave. Now. What is it? Fire. Look. Sarah turned to see orange light flickering in the valley below. Not one fire, dozens. A line of flames spreading across winter-dry grassland, driven by wind. Straight toward the cabin. He's burning us out, Caleb said grimly. Just like the Johnsons. Thomas appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand. We fight? Caleb looked at the 12-year-old boy, James Redfeather's son, and made a decision. No. We run. But we run smart, and we take everything Mercer thinks he's destroying. By the time he gets up here, this place will be empty as a broken promise. And then? Sarah asked, already gathering the boys. Caleb's smile was cold and dangerous. Then we remind Clayton Mercer that some debts come due in blood. The flames climbed the mountainside like demons, devouring everything in their path. Caleb moved with practiced efficiency, survival instinct taking over. Thomas, Jacob, grab blankets, coats, food. Into the wagon. Daniel stays with your mother. He pulled a ready-packed bag from behind the door. We've got 30 minutes. Sarah's hands trembled as she gathered their things, but her voice stayed steady. Where are we going? Higher ground. Old mining camp in the peaks, abandoned, but defensible. Fire won't reach that high, and Mercer's men won't follow in the dark. They worked in controlled chaos. Thomas and Jacob carried more than Sarah thought possible. Daniel clutched his wooden animals, eyes wide but trusting. Within 20 minutes, the wagon was ready. Caleb hitched his roan. Trail's narrow. I'll lead. You drive. Boys walk behind and watch our backs. Anyone sees riders, you shoot first. Understood, Thomas said, checking his rifle with steady hands. They moved out as embers began falling like burning snow. The trail was barely visible, winding through towering pines and jagged rock. Behind them, the fire roared closer, staining the sky red. Halfway up, Jacob grabbed Sarah's arm. Riders, 3 of them. Through the trees, torchlight flickered, Mercer's men closing in. They're hurting us, Caleb said grimly. Pushing us toward the cliff trail. That path's a death trap, Sarah said. I know. So what do we do? Caleb hesitated, calculating. We split. I take the wagon, draw them off. You take the boys through Widow's Pass. 3 miles north, cave marked with stacked stones. No, Sarah said instantly. We don't separate. Sarah, my husband lived 15 years with what you did to save him. I won't live with you dying to save us. We fight together. Caleb studied her, something fierce in his eyes. Then he nodded. All right. Together. He turned to the boys. Rear guard. If riders come close, fire high, spook the horses. Don't try to be heroes. I understand, Thomas said. Then hold on. Caleb warned. This is going to get rough. The next hour stretched endlessly. Caleb drove like a man possessed, finding paths that barely existed, keeping them ahead of fire and riders. Twice they stopped to clear fallen trees. Once the wagon nearly tipped on a sharp turn, saved by Caleb's strength and Sarah's quick thinking. The boys were extraordinary. Thomas spotted a flanking rider and fired, sending the horse bucking. Jacob called out obstacles before they could become deadly. But the fire gained ground. So did Mercer's men. They reached the cliff trail, a narrow ledge dropping hundreds of feet, when Caleb pulled the wagon to a halt. End of the line. A massive pine blocked the path. Behind them, 4 riders approached through smoke, rifles ready. They were trapped. Cave up there, Caleb said, pointing to a dark opening 30 yards up the cliff. Narrow entrance, we can hold it. How do we get up there? Jacob asked. I climb, drop rope, pull you up. Sarah looked at the riders, the cliff, her sons. The truth was clear, they didn't have time. I'll buy it, she said, raising her rifle. Sarah, no. Yes. You get those boys to safety. Before Caleb could argue, Mercer's men burst into view. Clayton Mercer rode at the front, face twisted with years of rage. End of the road, Thorne, he shouted. That woman and those boys belong to me. Debts due. Sarah stepped forward, rifle steady. We don't owe you anything. Your son's death was a tragedy, not murder. Mercer's laugh was bitter. Your husband lived. My boy didn't. You call that justice? Killing us won't change it. No, Mercer said. But it'll feel good. His men raised their rifles. Sarah fired first. The shot knocked a hat clean off a rider's head, a warning, but it made them duck. Ropes down! Caleb shouted. Sarah backed toward the cliff, firing again to keep them pinned. Thomas secured Daniel to the rope. Caleb hauled the boy up quickly. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the wagon, splintering wood. Jacob, go! Thomas shouted. Not without you! Go! Jacob clipped in and rose. Sarah's rifle clicked empty. She ducked behind the wagon as bullets hammered into it. Then the mountain groaned. A deep, cracking roar spread through the hillside. The burning forest above them was collapsing. Avalanche! Caleb shouted. Now! Thomas reached for the rope. Sarah shoved him forward. You first! Mama, now! He clipped in and rose. Sarah turned back with her pistol, and saw Mercer charging, gun aimed straight at her. Time slowed. She saw his finger tighten. The flash. The shot. Pain exploded through her shoulder, spinning her to the ground. Above, Caleb roared in fury. His rifle cracked, and Mercer's horse reared as the bullet missed by inches. Then Caleb was beside her. He descended the rope with reckless speed. He clipped her to the line and shouted, though she couldn't hear over the thunder of fire and falling rock. She rose through the air, barely conscious, shoulder burning like fire. Below, the mountainside collapsed, trees, flame, and boulders crashing down. Mercer and his men fled, their horses wild with terror. Sarah reached the cave. Thomas and Jacob pulled her inside. Daniel clung to her, crying. Moments later, Caleb hauled himself over the edge just as a massive burning tree crashed where he'd been. The avalanche roared past the cave mouth, fire and stone pouring down until it seemed the world itself was ending. Then, finally, silence. Caleb crawled to Sarah, hands shaking as he examined her wound. Clean through. You'll live. The boys? She whispered. We're here, Mama, Thomas said, voice breaking. She looked at them, all alive. Then at Caleb. You came back for me. Yeah, he said, tearing strips from his shirt to bind her shoulder. Couldn't let you go before you learned to make decent coffee. Despite the pain and terror, she laughed, a shaky, broken sound, but real. Outside, dawn broke over a changed world. The fire was dying, having consumed everything in its path. The trail they'd climbed was gone, buried beneath rock and ash. Somewhere below, Mercer, if he'd survived, would face the ruins of his hatred. But Sarah Calloway and her sons were alive. And for the first time in years, they were truly home. They stayed in the cave for 2 days while Sarah's shoulder healed and the ruins below cooled. Caleb had chosen well. The cave ran 30 feet back, with a spring for water and enough room for all of them. He'd also cached supplies there, dried meat, blankets, medicine, ammunition. A man who planned for disaster. How many hideouts do you have in these mountains? Sarah asked on the second morning as he rebandaged her shoulder with surprising gentleness. Enough, he said. Safety's an illusion. Best you can do is have options. Daniel sat nearby, arranging his wooden animals. Thomas and Jacob kept watch at the cave mouth, older now in ways boys shouldn't have to be. You think Mercer survived? Sarah asked. Probably. The devil looks after his own. Caleb tied off the bandage. But he's got problems. That fire didn't just burn my cabin, it took out 3 ranches, including part of his own. Witnesses saw his men riding with torches. The sheriff may have to act. Or may look the other way. Maybe. But Mercer showed his hand. He's not untouchable anymore. And we're not victims either. Sarah studied him, the scars, the years of loneliness, the hands that carved toys for Daniel and climbed into hell to save her. Why did you come back for me? She asked. You could have saved the boys and left. That would have cleared your debt. Caleb was quiet a long moment. Debt's got nothing to do with it anymore. Then what? He met her eyes, raw and uncertain. I haven't cared about anyone in 15 years. Thought I'd lost that right when Billy Mercer drowned. Then you showed up with those boys and that stubborn chin, and you looked at me like I was still a man worth trusting. His voice roughened. I realized I didn't want to be alone anymore. Didn't want to just survive. Wanted to live. Sarah's eyes filled. Your debt's paid, Caleb. More than paid. I know. He gave her a sad, hopeful smile. That's why I'm asking, not obligating. When we go down from here, when we figure out what's next, I'd like to stay part of it. Part of your lives. Because we're family now. Sarah said softly. Yeah. She took his hand and held on when he started to pull away. My boys need a good man in their lives, she said. One who'll teach them strength and honor. One who'll show them a hard choice doesn't define a life, what comes after does. Caleb's fingers tightened around hers. And I need someone who sees me. Not Ben's widow. Not a charity case. Just Sarah. I see you, Caleb said. Strongest person I've ever met. They sat there, hands joined, while Daniel hummed and the mountains slowly healed. On the third day, they descended. The land looked apocalyptic, hillsides reduced to ash and stumps. The cabin was gone, buried or burned. The barn had collapsed, though Caleb's roan had survived, waiting in a clearing like a miracle. At the base of the trail, they found 2 of Mercer's hired men crushed under avalanche debris. God have mercy, Sarah whispered, turning Daniel away. He did, Caleb said grimly. They won't be hunting anyone now. Thomas stared at the bodies. Is it wrong that I'm not sorry? No, Caleb said. It's honest. They made their choices. But don't let it make you hard. The day you stop feeling anything at death is the day you become what they were. They buried the men because it was the right thing to do, then continued to Redemption Creek. They found chaos. The fire had devastated ranches and farms, though the town itself still stood. People were hauling water, counting losses, trying to rebuild. And in the center of the square, Sheriff Bradley was arresting Clayton Mercer. Sarah and Caleb stopped at the edge of the crowd as the soot-blackened rancher was led toward the jail. 3 people dead, the sheriff was saying. Dozens of homesteads destroyed. All because you couldn't let go of grief from 15 years ago. Mercer saw Caleb across the crowd. Their eyes met, grief and vengeance, 2 men chained to one old tragedy. Then Mercer looked at Sarah's boys, and something in his face broke. Not hatred anymore. Just exhaustion and sorrow. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking. God help me, I'm sorry. Then he was taken away. Sarah let out a breath. I thought I'd feel victorious. I just feel tired. That's normal, Caleb said. Revenge never feels as good as people think. They found rooms at the boarding house, where Mrs. Chen took one look at Sarah's shoulder and the exhausted boys and simply fed them. That night, Sarah stood at the window watching the town. I need to go tomorrow, she said when Caleb joined her. To Ben's grave. To tell him what happened. I'll come, Caleb said. If you want. I want. The next morning they rode out alone. Ben Calloway's grave lay on a hill overlooking the valley, marked by a simple wooden cross Sarah had carved herself. She knelt there while Caleb stood respectfully back. I love you, Ben, she said quietly. I always will. But I'm still alive, and our boys need a father. And I think I'm ready to let someone else in. Not to replace you. Never that. But to walk forward with. Wind stirred the grass. A hawk circled overhead. I think he'd approve, Caleb said softly. Sarah stood and faced him. Tell me I'm not being foolish. Tell me this isn't just crisis making me feel things that aren't real. Caleb stepped closer, hands gentle on her arms. Can't tell you that. What we've been through changes people. Maybe some of it is circumstance. He smiled faintly. But circumstance is just life by another name. And life's too short to overthink what makes you happy. You make me happy, Sarah said, almost wonderingly. You and your silence and your secrets and your damn wooden animals. No idea how that happened, he said. But I'm not arguing. When they rode back, something had shifted, not a final decision, but a door opening. The boys noticed at once. Thomas grinned. Jacob elbowed him. Daniel simply climbed into Caleb's lap as if it had always belonged to him. Are you staying? Daniel asked. Forever? Caleb looked at Sarah. She looked back. Yeah, little man, he said. I'm staying. But neither of them knew that in his jail cell, Clayton Mercer had just received a visitor, his lawyer, bearing one last desperate message that would test everything they'd begun to build. The lawyer's name was Silas Crane, slick, well-dressed, and unsettling. He visited Mercer late that night. Sarah and Caleb only learned of it the next morning when Sheriff Bradley arrived at the boarding house, troubled. Mercer wants to see you, he said. And before you refuse, you should hear what he's offering. They left the boys with Mrs. Chen and went to the jail. Mercer looked decades older, shoulders sagging, eyes hollow, the fire of hatred burned out. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Talk, Caleb said. I'll hang for this, Mercer said. 3 dead in the fire, including my foreman. Property destruction. Attempted murder. I've got months left, maybe less. And? Sarah asked. I want to make it right. He nodded to the lawyer, who handed over papers. Your land, the one the bank took, I bought it. Planned to destroy it. Instead, I'm giving it back. Clear title. No debts. Sarah stared at the documents. Why? I saw your boys yesterday. Alive. Whole. After everything I tried to do. His voice broke. And I realized Billy would hate me. He was 8, kind, open. He made friends without seeing race or difference. He had a better soul than I ever did. Tears streaked his face. I became something he never would have forgiven. I can't face him like that. Let me do this one decent thing. Silence hung heavy. The land's not enough, Caleb said. Mercer looked stricken. What else? You write everything down. Every crime, every deal, every person you hurt. You testify against everyone who helped you, the banker, the officials, the deputy who ignored your violence. You bring the whole system down. That destroys everything I built. Yeah, Caleb said. That's the price. The silence stretched, then Mercer nodded. I'll do it. And one more thing, Sarah said. You create a fund, for families hurt by the fire, for those you've wronged. Use your money to rebuild. Mercer lowered his head. Done. Thank you, for giving me the chance. They left him behind, broken, but changed. Outside, Caleb looked at Sarah. That was generous. No, she said. It was practical. His money can heal what he destroyed. And his testimony can clean out the corruption. She paused. Forgiveness isn't for him. It's for us. I won't carry his hate. Then what will you carry? Caleb asked. She faced him fully. A home. A future for my boys. And maybe. She took his hand. Something for us. Caleb hesitated. I'm not an easy man. Neither am I, she said with a faint smile. But we survived too much not to try. He kissed her then, soft, uncertain, full of promise. Across the way, her boys watched, Thomas grinning. The weeks that followed moved quickly. Mercer kept his word. His testimony ignited an investigation that swept through Redemption Creek, exposing corruption in banks and offices alike. Officials fell. Land was restored. His fund helped rebuild homes. Sarah's property was returned, and a new house rose where the old one had stood. Neighbors who once turned away now came to help, seeing her not as an outcast but as a survivor. Caleb worked beside them, his skill steady and reliable. But he also built a small cabin at the edge of her land. Until we decide things, he said. Don't want talk. People will talk anyway, Sarah replied. But I understand. Spring came slowly, healing the land scarred by fire. Green pushed through ash. Wildlife returned. Life continued, stubborn and resilient. One warm April day, Sarah stood on her porch watching her boys work in the garden with Caleb. Thomas was nearly grown, strong and capable. Jacob worked with quiet focus. Daniel, now 5, chattered endlessly, his wooden animals lined up like an audience. This was her life, hard won, imperfect, but hers. Mercer was hanged in May, not for the fire, but for an earlier murder his confession revealed. Sarah didn't attend, but she heard his final message: tell those boys their fathers would be proud. She wept, not for Mercer, but for the lost. For Billy. For James Redfeather. For Ben Calloway. For all the pain that might have been avoided. But when she looked at her sons, she saw something stronger than grief: hope. That evening, Caleb came to her door carrying a carved wooden box. "Made this for you," he said. Inside lay a beaded bracelet. "It was Billy Mercer's," Caleb explained. "James made it for him. I found it after the accident. Kept it as a reminder of what I failed to save." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now it's time to let it go. To remember him as a boy, not a burden." She took his hands. "Then stop living like a visitor. Move into the house. Be part of this family. People will talk, I don't care anymore," she said. "We're already a family. It's time we lived like one." He pulled her close. "Yeah," he said softly. "I want that." They married quietly in June. No church, just the boys, Mrs. Chen, and Sheriff Bradley. Thomas gave her away. Jacob held the rings. Daniel stood between them, holding both their hands. It was enough. Years later, people told their story in different ways. Some judged. Some misunderstood. But those who had seen the truth knew better. Two broken people had chosen hope over bitterness. Had built something lasting from loss. Had given 3 boys a future. On summer evenings, they could be seen on their porch, Sarah in her chair, Caleb nearby, the boys laughing in the yard, while the mountains stood silent and steady. They never forgot what they'd lost. But they refused to be defined by it. And in the end, that was their greatest victory. 15 years after their marriage, when Sarah Calloway Thorne was 43 and Caleb was pushing 60. They stood together at 2 graves on the hillside, Ben Calloway's weathered cross and a new stone they'd finally placed for Billy Mercer, the boy whose death had changed so many lives. Their sons were men now. Thomas ran a timber operation with Caleb, his quiet strength a blend of both fathers. Jacob had become a teacher, carrying forward Sarah's love of learning. Daniel, the boy who'd asked, "Where do we sleep tonight?" so long ago, was studying law in Helena, determined to protect families like theirs. "You think we did right by them?" Caleb asked, his hair silver now but his eyes still sharp. Sarah leaned against him, their bodies fitting together with the ease of years. "We did our best. That's all anyone can do." Ben would have been proud. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "He would have. And so would Billy, I think. We turned their deaths into life. That has to count for something." They stood in silence, 2 survivors who'd become more than the sum of their wounds. Watching the sun set over mountains that had witnessed everything: tragedy and revenge, fire and survival, the slow, difficult work of forgiveness. "Ready to go home?" Caleb asked finally. Sarah smiled and took his hand. "I'm already there." And they walked down the hillside together, leaving the ghosts to rest at last. The end.